Today, as a slight diversion from my recent travel videos, I've had the need to discuss the psychological effects of COVID. I think it's fair to say that everyone is experiencing this a bit differently. Depending on your age, depending on your personality, depending on where you're living in the world, we're all facing different challenges related to COVID. Some people are really struggling, some people are thriving. What's the difference? I mean, if you think about the different kind of demographics affected, like children, they probably haven't been able to, sort of see their friends, play outside. I mean, they've had playgrounds shut, taped off, even, like crime scenes. They haven't been able to go back to school yet, in a lot of cases. And now you've got this big debate, where the governments are trying to push children to go back to school in September. And there's a lot of resistance from parents and teachers about this strategy. It's a tricky one, right? I mean, if you look at kind of older kids or, sort of students and things, students are having to, study online. I mean, where's the engagement? I've done a number of online courses, and trust me, you don't focus as much, I'd say, or learn as much as you do in the classroom environment. And of course, universities are still going to be charging the same. You're not going to get a reduced fee for this service, so is that a fair point? And then you talk about like my demographic, I mean, I'm technically one of the lucky ones. I can work from home. I haven't lost my job like a lot of people have. But it's not really the same. You have team calls, you're constantly engaged in emails and that kind of thing, but working from home, it's hard. For some of us, like some people are loving it. They're like, oh, brilliant. But I think it depends on, the network you have around you. If you're at home with a family, you have your pluses and minuses, right? Especially if you've got young children, you're there to support more, you're spending more time with them. But at the same time, it's a big distraction. The number of calls you see where people, have their kids in the background running around trying to get their attention. I know some people that have had to kind of work in, like other places, like just to get away from the kids so they can focus. And plus, we're designed to have these different lives, spending too much time at home with your loved ones, it's going to create some tension. This is just what happens. I mean, myself, I live by myself. And, one of the things, moving out here is work, of course, became a major focus of mine. Living abroad, not having like old school friends here, old uni friends, or, you just kind of, you feel isolated. I would definitely say that. I miss, being in the office, talking to people, catching up, gossiping. You get a smidgen of that in the calls and things that you're on, but it feels almost superficial. You can exchange messages on, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever. It's not the same. I mean, you can have calls. I talk to my family regularly. I talk to friends from back home. Like I do normally. So that part of my life hasn't changed. It's just what we talk about has changed. And I mean, one thing like, the office I'm in, for example, they've elected to remain closed. They did try to open up briefly in June. And, they had, I don't know, about 100 people out of, 400 or 500 working in our office, volunteered to go back in. In July, they said, okay, we're going to close the offices again. There isn't enough interest. The problem, from my point of view, is they never asked who wanted to go back in July. Myself, I wanted to go back to the office, but I saw all of the restrictions, wear a mask, wash your hands like constantly, clean your desk all the time. Like in the canteens, like only like one person in, one person out, with kind of limited facilities. You have regular temperature checks. It just felt counterproductive to the work experience if you have all these distractions. And I was like, okay, well, I want to go back to work, but I also want to be able to focus at work. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a month, maybe things will be relaxed. And then that chance was taken away from me. And now nobody knows when the office is going to be opening again. I know back in the UK, the government's actually, encouraging businesses, incentivizing businesses to reopen and let staff back into the workforce. But yeah, it's a tricky one, the pandemic's still here. It may have gone down in Europe, but it's still around. It's still possible for big outbreaks and things. But one of the things I keep thinking to myself, maybe I'm cynical, maybe I'm just spot on, is how much money a company's saving by having their staff working from home. Is this the real motivation why so many offices are closed now? Not because of fear of the pandemic, but we can save some money because this is what companies do, right? They're not paying their electricity, they're not, paying cleaning staff, restocking the coffee machines. And do we get any of that benefit back? Are they going to pay my electricity bill? Are they going to help pay for my internet? I don't think so. So in a way, workers are being exploited right now in the name of COVID. And this isn't even going on to the people who've lost their jobs. So many people have lost their jobs. Businesses have gone under. There's been less demand on a lot of services. It's frightening, really. I mean, even me, I'm still working, but I'm in fear. My company's been downsizing, and they've been they say, oh no, you're going to be fine, and then one of your colleagues gets fired, and you're like, shit. Okay, so how much can you trust companies? I mean, I was pretty much made redundant before, after assurances that things were going to be okay and we're going to do the proper consultation. It becomes very hard to trust your employers these days. I don't like to think that, I like to be a trusting person, but I've just become so skeptical. But let's talk about some of the other things. I mean, look at the elderly, for example. They're living in fear. It's not just the elderly that are living in fear. So many people are afraid right now. They don't want to get sick. If not for themselves, because a lot of people are like, oh, if I get it, it'll go out my system, I'll be fine. But they're afraid of infecting loved ones. Maybe they live with elderly, parents or grandparents, and they don't want to infect them. They don't want to, create that risk. And I get that. I've had a lot of friends who, would especially back in the UK, they're like, okay, the government's relaxed the rules, you can come round, but you can just sit in the garden. You're not allowed into the house, sorry. I can't risk you infecting my house, but you can sit in the garden, that's fine. Okay. And, in a way, we're all being kind of forced to spend so much more time indoors. Okay, the weather this year has been pretty shit, to be honest. We've had a lot of storms, rain, spells of sun. So, maybe we would have stayed a bit more inside anyway, but maybe we'd be going out to pubs more, right? Yeah, it's a tricky one. And then you have to look at some of the other effects that are happening to people, you know? Like, travel has suddenly become a taboo. It's like, oh, you're thinking of going traveling. Is that safe? You know, you should probably, quarantine yourself after you come back. And even like those of us who do travel or want to travel, what do we face? We face the airlines, and the airlines like, yeah, book a flight. Yeah, we're going here. Yeah, come on, oh, well, look, we'll lower the price for you, get you in there. And then flights cancelled. Um, of course it varies country to country, but when that happens, not only, you're not technically losing money, or are you? Like, you get credits, or you can sometimes get a refund if you're willing to wait months on end. But I know people who psychologically have been so harmed. It's like, I know someone, in particular, who travel is their life. It's what makes them happy. It's what they care about most in the world, and they haven't been able to leave the country. And you can see it's causing so much anxiety, so much sadness, so much depression. And that's the thing, these psychological effects then have physical effects on people. We don't have the energy levels. We lose our kind of health. It's really sad. And the question is, what else is going to happen? Like, you like to think that eventually we'll get past this virus and, the world will go back to normal. Well, you've got so many people saying, no, that's not going to happen. The world's not going to be the same. And it becomes a balancing act. It's like, okay, so, let's say there's a second wave of COVID and things go back to, how they've been. What do? Do we address like the model of Sweden, where they pretty much just didn't really institute anything? Do we follow, some of the other countries that like lock down completely, don't let anything happen? Like the way that China dealt with it. What's the best strategy? And people are still figuring that out. It becomes a weight. You're weighing between, do we put people's lives at risk, or, and sort of save the economy, or do we let the economy suffer and damage people's mental health? It's a really tricky one, because that's the sad thing. A lot of people have died from this. Not, it's like a fraction of the people, but it's not just the people who are dying, it's also the people who have like the long-term, sort of physical effects. They're just starting to study that now. It's a tricky one. I mean, there are lots of different ways of people dealing with this. People have taken up new hobbies. People have been educating themselves more, using this as a kind of a time, like, I'm in my bunker, I'm going, to improve myself. This is something that I've tried to do, but it's hard to find the motivation sometimes. And then you have like your introverted people versus your extroverted people. Of course, extroverts are suffering so much right now because they need people around them. And introverts are like, oh, this is my time to shine. I bet you like, gaming is much up. People are watching Netflix a lot more, and other, social media, streaming platforms. Of course, like the online industry has really boomed. Like getting food delivered to your house, click and collect services, in various stores. People, don't want to go back to supermarkets necessarily, because again, it's a potential breeding ground. I mean, here in Poland, things are changing. You know, I'd say that the main thing that I still feel anyway is, you know, the not being able to go back to the office part. But you know, a lot of people don't mind that. You know, people in my team are like, yeah, I prefer working from home. It's, you know, it's more relaxed. It's a better atmosphere, less stress, less pressure. But at the same time, your internet's not as good. You know, you don't have as good a connection to the network. When you're trying to do work, it's not as efficient. Like, you know, I've noticed people are doing much longer hours than they would in an office. Is that healthy? You know, I mean, I wish I had some conclusions from this whole situation, but, you know, maybe this is just my little rant. You know, talk a little bit about like my situation and what's going on, like, but I don't know. I have to admit, like, wearing a mask isn't so bad, and to be honest, I would encourage everyone to go out there and, you know, if you haven't got a mask, bloody well start wearing one. You know, all these people who are talking about like, oh, it infringes my freedom and shit like that. What, your freedom to get ill? Your freedom to infect other people? Because let's be honest, the masks, they're not just, you know, they're not primarily for your protection. They're protection for the people around you. Because how is this thing mainly spread? According to, you know, what you read, it's like coughing and sneezing. That's what's spreading it. And if you're coughing into a mask, you know, all that bacteria is going into the mask, not into the air around you. Like, come on, stop being so selfish. It's ridiculous. You know, I like the idea that a lot of shops, they kind of have the gloves, you know, that you can put on when you go in. I hate doing it. I really hate it. But at the same time, it makes sense. But then they're saying like, oh, you know, even walking, you know, you collect COVID on your shoes apparently, and you walk that around. You know, and of course, wash your hands. You know, you had the Boris Johnson like sing happy birthday while you're washing your hands, and that will tell you how long to wash them for. Oh God, all these preventative measures, which, well, let's hope from the upside of this, people are at least a lot kind of more hygienic, maybe a little bit more socially conscious about giving people distance. Some people will be, some people won't. But yeah, it's sad. But yeah, sorry, you know, like I felt the need to talk about this. And I don't know who needs to hear this video, if anyone, but what's your own situation like? You know, how has COVID affected you? You know, feel free to put something in the comments, talk about how you're getting on, or create some more memes. I have to admit, I've been loving a lot of the COVID memes on the internet. But then again, it's a good way of a good coping strategy. You know, comedy is the, you know, adversary of fear, I would say. But yeah, so maybe this video's been a bit too serious, but I don't know. I just felt like saying a few things. You know, get back to some of the blogging that I was doing before. But stay safe. You know, look after yourselves and look after those around you. And thank you for watching.